All right, welcome back. It's time for a quick little preview. Today we're going to be talking about Fnatic, the first team that I'm going to be covering that has qualified to TI11 based on DPC points. And in case you missed it, I've already done 6 other previews just like this one for teams that came in through their regional qualifiers, those being Hikori, Talon, Sonics, Entity, then we had BB Team, and RNG. If you want to check out any of those, you're a fan of any of those teams, feel free to check them out. Link in the description, or just check out my most recent uploads on my channel. And yeah, as I mentioned, we're going to be doing Fnatic today, and in the coming few days, I'm going to be doing Evil Geniuses as well as Game and Gladiators as we make our way up the DPC standings towards number 1. And of course, in just about a week and a half from now, we have our last chance qualifier starting, where we're going to have 2 more teams qualifying to TI, which is very, very exciting. So, taking a look at Fnatic, they are the second place team by DPC points heading into this year's TI from Southeast Asia. They finished 12th place internationally, so they just made the cut. And in fact, it looked like they hadn't made the cut, but because of some weird rounding issues with the DPC points and point reductions and stuff like that, that Valve didn't feel the need to announce until after the end of the DPC season, they actually almost barely missed out on qualifying for top 12. But again, with those weird changes that Valve made that they didn't announce until the last second, they actually did make it. So they qualify with 1,020 points, 12th place internationally. Taking a look at their roster, this has been a roster, one of a few that has actually stayed together throughout the entire DPC season. No changes to this roster since before this DPC season, since after TI10. Playing position 1, we have Raven, and his furthest run ever at a TI has been finishing 7th and 8th place at TI6 with TNC. This will be his 5th time attending an international. For Armel, this will be his 3rd time attending TI. His furthest run has been finishing 9th and 12th place at TI9 with TNC as well. For Jabs, his furthest run was also finishing 9th and 12th place, that being at TI8 with Mineski, and then at TI10 with Fnatic as well. This will be his 4th international. For DJ, we have him finishing 4th place all the way back at TI6 with Fnatic. He has been with Fnatic a very, very long time, and sure, it hasn't been exactly 6 straight years. A lot of that time has been with Fnatic. He's basically the face of the franchise at this point. But yeah, this will be his 6th international. For Hanuel, he's actually the only member on the roster, including the coach, that has never played a TI to this point. The closest he has ever been was finishing 5th and 6th place last TI in the qualifiers with OB Neon. And of course, we have Coach Sunby, who's going to be coming in. His furthest run as a player was finishing 13th and 16th place at TI5 with NPP, but as a coach, he has been there 5 times already. This will be his 6th time, his furthest run being at TI9 with Team Secret, where they placed 4th overall. So a lot of players on this roster that have been to TI numerous times, of course, excluding Hanuel. And they've all gone on some pretty good runs, but they're overall looking for that top 3 finish, something that none of these guys have been able to achieve yet, and something that they're all looking to get to, hopefully. So let's take a look at some results from this past DPC season. Things kicked off pretty well, and things have been pretty consistent for Fnatic. They start off the tour very well by finishing 2nd place in the region, 5-2 record with a 180 DPC points right off the bat. Although with that momentum, it didn't carry on very well into those regional finals, where they actually were the first team to get eliminated. They finished 4th place overall, going 0-2, dropping straight to the lower bracket and then getting knocked out by SMG. They earned 0 DPC points there. But heading into Tour 2, they pick right back up where they left off in Tour 1, and they finished 1st place with a 6-1 record, including winning some tiebreakers that earned themselves 400 DPC points, which would end up being a very large portion of their overall total this season. And it's especially noteworthy that because they didn't have any roster changes at all, no deductions, which is why they just barely made it. If they had any deductions at whatsoever throughout this entire season, they would not have qualified. So with that 1st place finish, they of course qualified to the first official major of the DPC season, that being the Stockholm Major, where they placed pretty well, probably not as far as they were expecting to go, but regardless, finishing 7th and 8th is not terrible, especially for the first LAN that the team has played since TI with a lot of new members. They go 2-2-2 in the group stage, and they go 1-1 on the main stage for an additional 240 DPC points in total. Heading into Tour 3, again, a lot of momentum on their side. They end up finishing third place, which is a bit of a drop, but overall their record is still great. They're still 5-2. They still qualify for the last major of the year, earn themselves 200 DPC points. However, in that last major, things again just weren't really picking up all that well, and they actually finished 9th to 12th place even after starting in the upper bracket. Their group stage, although it wasn't amazing, it was enough to get them to the upper bracket. They go 2-5-1. However, they lost both of their series on the main stage, which fortunately for them, other teams didn't do all that well. They were not able to get caught up to in the standings, but had they been caught up to, again, outsiders, Virtus Pro was just 2 points behind Fnatic, so very, very close. Taking a look at their results against other teams attending TI11, and this is going to be including teams that are playing in the last chance qualifiers. There was a total of 65 games against those teams in which they went 34-31, so just over 50% win rate there. In Tour 1, again, a quick loss to Boom 0-2, but then they were able to take down T1 twice, the first time in the regular season 2-1, the second time in some tiebreakers, in which that secured them second place. But then in the regional finals, again, they would lose to T1. They would also lose to SMG, which unfortunately, due to those circumstances before, their regional qualifiers were not able to play in the regional qualifiers. Given that they did, they were probably going to finish at least top 4. They would have probably made it to the last chance qualifiers, but SMG, unfortunately for them, were not able to, and so they're not going to be on this list here, of course. For Tour 2, a nice 2-1 win over Polaris, as Polaris gets upgraded to the upper division. They lose 2-1 to Boom. They then beat T1 2-1, so heading into the tiebreakers, they're tied for first place currently with Boom, the only team that they lost to, and they actually overcome them for their first time beating Boom in this DPC season 2-0. Heading into the Stockholm Major, looking at their best of twos first, they start off with a loss to Team Spirit 2-0. They then beat TSM FTX 2-0. They tie both Liquid and Thunder Awaken. They then lose 2-0 to Gaming Gladiators. And then on the main stage in the lower bracket, they take a win 2-1 over T1, which has been a team that they've been able to pretty reliably beat at this point throughout the past DPC season. But then they get knocked out 2-1 by OG, who at that point were on a run to a major win. Heading into Tour 3, they take down Talent and Polaris 2-0. They lose to Boom 2-0, and then they take down T1. So again, T1 at this point, they're pretty much able to beat them every time they face them. Boom, however, is one of the more unreliable teams, probably the top competition for Fnatic at this point in the DPC season. Heading into Arlington, they tie OG, Virtus Pro, and RNG to kick things off. They then lose their first series of the best of twos up against PSG LGD. No fault in that, however. They do then tie Thunder Awaken. They beat Liquid and Sonics, and then finally to round out the group stage, they tie Talon. And then on the main stage, starting in the upper bracket, they lose to Aster 2-0, and then finally they get knocked out by Beast Coast 2-1 in the lower bracket, which thankfully it was not enough for some other teams to catch up to Fnatic, as I previously mentioned. But you really wish if they had just won one of those series, they would have gotten themselves a little bit further ahead, but they ended up being okay. Now taking a look at some stats, in which this is covering every single match throughout the entire DPC season, which is now 96 games, where they go 54-42. On Radiant, they were 30-27, so just a little bit above 50%. But on Dire, their win rate, which was much better, with 24-15. For first pick, they were 33-27. Last pick, 21-15. On Radiant first pick, they were 22-20, so very close to being a 50% win rate there. Same thing for Radiant second pick, where they were 8-7. They were 11-7 on Dire first pick and 13-8 on Dire last pick. For games that were less than 40 minutes, they were 34-20, which is an astoundingly high win rate for games that were quite short in comparison to games that were over 40 minutes, where they were actually below 50%, where they went 19-22. So for Fnatic, they were usually winning games very, very quickly, and if games tend to go a little bit longer, that's when they tended to struggle a little bit, which is a little surprising for a roster that has been together as long as they have. We'll see if that is something that continues to persist heading into this year's International. In Game 1s, they started off very strong usually in most of their series. They went 25-17. In Game 2s, however, they were 19-21 for a 48% win rate. But in Game 3s, they were overall pretty solid, especially when it was a deciding Game 3. They go 9-4 for a 69% win rate. Overall, for their average GPM, they had a 23.04 GPM. XPM was 27.72 for an average KDA of 366 and an average match duration of 39 minutes and 10 seconds, which is pretty high when you think about the fact that they usually did quite well when games were shorter. Finally, let's take a look at some hero stats, where across these 96 games, they picked a total of 98 different heroes. Their most picked being Death Prophet, following up with Monkey King with 14 picks. Same thing for Puck. We then have Coddle and Tusk with 13 picks each. At Templar Assassin, Mars, Kunkka, and Chaos Knight with 12 picks each. For their best heroes, they have Luna, who went a perfect 6-0, Death Prophet, who went 14-2, which, you know, even though that hero did just get nerfed a little bit, I would still be surprised if that hero didn't get picked at least at all at TI. I'm sure Fnatic will be eyeing that hero up. Queen of Pain went 5-1. Same thing for Lion and Undying. Again, Undying being another one of those heroes that did recently get nerfed. We'll see if they continue to pick that hero. And Puck, who went 11-3. For their worst heroes, there weren't really a whole lot of heroes that they had a terrible win rate with. Invoker and Void Spirit, they were both 0-3 with, but Enchantress was 1-7. So that was one that I felt the need to throw on there. And for most bans, they banned a total of 94 different heroes. Those being Medusa with 34 bans. Very high ban rate for Medusa, and when you're in a division against 23 Savage, to some extent that makes sense. There was also Tino on Boom at the start of the season that loved his Medusa, so that certainly makes sense. We also had Terrorblade with 33 and Beastmaster with 22 bans. So those first two heroes being far and ahead of any other heroes getting banned by Fnatic this DPC season. So yeah, heading into this year's International, Fnatic overall has had a pretty great season. Maybe some underwhelming performances at LANs, but overall not terrible. Again, the Arlington Major might have just been a fluke. You'd wish that they maybe had gone a little bit further in Stockholm, but overall this team has put up some pretty good numbers, and I'm really excited to see how they do at this year's International. Again, they're coming in as the second seed from Southeast Asia. Let's see if they end up living up to it. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. Again, I'll be having previews going up for Evil Geniuses and Gaming Gladiators going up very, very shortly, so be on the lookout for that. And thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.